All right. Hey, everybody. It's the 14th of September, 2023. This is Plutus PBL Live Coding. We meet every Wednesday and Thursday at 1400 UTC to try to figure out how to build stuff together. We were talking a little bit before going live today about some new repos. Alex is playing with some minimal implementations of like a Plutus template. And IOG recently released this IOG-X. You can think of it as a starter for using Nick's flake template. But I know that Alex, the journey to understanding what flakes are takes a little while, so it's okay if you're not there yet. We talked, Faizan is going to lead us for a little while, just looking at module 301 and Demeter and getting that to load up. I'm eager to troubleshoot that and have some updates there. But before we go live for that demo, somebody posted this sticky note: connection of front end with PAB, create a test API endpoint and get test response from server. Does anybody want to say a little bit more about this prompt right here?
I think Akash has posted this query.
Yeah, Akash, do you want to say more about this question?
I think he left the meeting. I think we'll be joining.
Yeah, okay. Cool. So this is something we'll definitely come back to. The PAB, this stands for Plutus Application Backend. And it's actually an idea that didn't quite catch on. The most important thing for you to know is that what IOG meant by Plutus Application Backend was a library that would allow you to do all the off-chain parts of transaction building so that you could interact with your validators. What actually happened, and this is good to know if you're relatively new to Cardano development, is that it was hard to use the PAB. Development was slow. I'm not sure if there were enough resources dedicated to it. And what happened is along the way, other people built tools and services that essentially do the same thing that the PAB was supposed to do. And in my opinion, that's the best thing that could happen to this ecosystem. We want many different application backends, okay? So the first thing to understand is, hey, what's the point of the PAB in the first place? The point of the PAB is to build valid transactions. That's what we need to do. On-chain code, the validator. Basically, a validator is just a really fancy true or false switch that can have lots of inputs, okay? That's all it can do. All it can do is say, yes, spend these funds, or no, don't. Yes, mint these tokens, or no, don't. Yes, distribute these staking rewards, or no, don't. But what's the thing that's being allowed to do those things? It's a transaction. Can this transaction spend these funds? Can this transaction mint these tokens? Or can this transaction be used to claim these staking rewards, right? And that doesn't happen inside of a Plutus validator. That happens with off-chain code, building transactions. And what you've seen so far in this course, we haven't touched anything that's directly called the PAB. You've learned how to build some transactions on Cardano CLI. Maybe if you've dipped your toes into Mesh, for example, you've learned how to build transactions there. And maybe you're starting to imagine that you could write specialized services for building specific kinds of transactions to a particular use case. And that would be an example of a focused PAB for whatever application, okay? So if you see these letters, I wouldn't worry about it too much anymore. But if your goal is to build any sort of API that can take inputs and build transactions, that's absolutely something we can look at together. That's a really, really exciting frontier. Now, I don't know if I'm missing the mark on the question though. So any questions about what I just shared there, or does anybody have alternative ways they're looking at this concept? Me too, Akash. I'm excited to dig into this. Transaction building is a huge part of application development. And I think in terms of the number of people who need to understand it and just the number of lines of code that are going to ultimately be written, the off-chain stuff, the transaction building stuff is a lot more than the contract writing part. Okay, a contract, it's hard to write, sure. You got to think and make a plan and carefully implement exactly the logic you want. But once it's done, it's done. Right. And once it's deployed on chain, if you change it, you're going to have to redeploy it again. Right. So the on-chain part is actually going to be a relatively small amount of your development time. The off-chain part is where a great amount of the work is going to happen. We can go farther with this, but let's jump now. Faizan, you ready to share a screen and just show us what's going on with Demeter?
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to unshare here. Cameron, welcome. That's awesome that you got through the onboarding modules. And if you're getting stuck at Nix, you're in great company. We've all been there. So don't hesitate to ask questions and show us where you're at.
Yeah. So I was going through this module, PBL 1.3, to understand how data is used in Plutus validator. So first step is to clone this repository and check out this one. So I have done it, but the issue I am facing is like this one. I have tried doing Cabal REPL many of times, but it's occurring the same error again and again.
Oh, I know this error.
Yeah, I have also faced this same error before when I was starting with the PPBL in the 100 module. But when I did Cabal REPL 3 to 4 times, this error is gone. But now it's no, it's just occurring again.
And what size Demeter instance are you running right now?
It's medium size on production.
Okay. This is on our end. I just asked, Santiago is the founder and CTO at Demeter. I think he's a lead developer. And he has been caching our repositories so that this error doesn't happen. And so let me just ping him. We could even send him a link to this recording. That'll be fun. But yeah, we should be able to get that fixed for you. You could try moving to a large.
Yeah, I tried it before. I tried
It didn't work.
using the large, but it didn't work. So I
Okay.
made a new account and it's showing the same.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we got to get that fixed for you. And if anybody else runs into this problem, it might be just that this is in his backlog. But yeah, it's a really nice kind of white glove service he's providing for us over here at Plutus PBL, just making sure that these load up quickly. But I'll ask him the status of that. And this is in the module lesson 3.
Yep, 301.3.
Thanks. And yeah, I'm sorry about that. Let's get that working for you quickly. And I got to check.
Is there any other way? Means we can mention the Plutus. Just a minute.
Can you
So-
run git status right there just to see where we are? And hmm,
And yeah, this one should be same like, yeah. If you did this one also,
I met this error before and I dropped in the chat the link to issue with Cabal Haskell, which describes exactly failed to build Mu 1.2 failure occurred during step, and this depends on the Cabal 3.8.
here, try git checkout main. Good. And I'm curious if Cabal, so do Cabal update first. I just want to see if it has something to do with this tag. And this might take a few minutes. So if other people have questions while we're watching this, feel free to jump in.
yeah, so I was having a question. So is there any other way we can mention the Cardano prelude version here in the build dependency? Like we can just here Cardano prelude, which is equal to the version of it.
Let's see what errors we get next. And yeah, so that's a separate concern from the storage issue. And so let's pin that one for just a few minutes, okay? Can you give us a Cabal REPL now? And let's just see how far it goes.
It's getting error only for 3 libraries. That is Cardano Prelude, Open AI, and Move. Something like that.
Yeah, so I wanna isolate why it's happening. I'm not sure if it's happening because of the tag we were using or for some other reason. So let's see. And this might be why it was happening. I'll update the docs too if that checkout turns out to be the problem. But you've gotten this far before, right? The error doesn't happen right away. Yeah, so let's see if this gets a little farther and then we'll see what errors we get.
James,
Hey, Dan.
hey. Just while we're waiting for this, I've noticed Cameron has put a note in the chat about getting stuck on Nix. I've had someone, Monty, I think it is, on Discord, saying that he or she, don't know which, is stuck trying to get Nix installed. I just wondered if maybe we make a thing of running through a Nix install next week sometime.
Absolutely. Yep, and I
Yeah.
think, and we've done that a few times, so that
Yeah.
might be a breakout room as well. And I'm just going to open breakout rooms right now, just in case anybody needs them. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. And if you'd be willing to facilitate that, that'd be cool. It'd be a nice way of growing our network.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I
Give
was
us a-
wondering if Nix is even really, necessary. I mean, it just seems super heavy, you know, as opposed to just, you know, maybe just run, I'm on a Mac, you know, just running it natively, you know, the libraries and building a project, you know, so I guess I was thinking about exploring just not just bypassing the next thing.
Yeah. Dan,
It
what were
just-
you gonna say?
it just takes a long time to build, and I don't know, it seems really heavy, and I'd seen a few posts, so there's some discussion about it.
Are you on one of the like newer M1 or M2 Macs or the earlier version?
I've tried it, I'm both, you know, I have both, but you know, I started on an Intel Mac and then, you know, kind of tried it again on an M2. And yeah, so, you know, I actually got to go back. I gave up and said, oh, you know, forget this, and said, okay, I'm just going to go, you know, improve my Haskell for a while. and
Okay.
so I got to go back in and see where the exact issue was.
That's definitely something we can work through, and you're definitely right. It is heavy, and it's also, I think, ultimately worth it. But also, this is why some people just prefer Aiken right from the jump, because it doesn't have that kind of onboarding experience. And it's possible to run Haskell Plutus without Nix, but that comes with its own potential problems. So I think the Nix bit, although frustrating, there's a couple of things we can look at, and maybe we'll even have time today to look at that for a minute. Let's jump back just to Faizan for a moment here. Yeah, sorry, this error is still happening, right? So this is, let's get those caches updated. I'll ping Santiago right after this. I wouldn't worry yet about the dependency issues you're getting, because some of those are just coming from the fact that earlier dependencies failed to build because of the memory issue that you're running into. So I don't think we should spend time trying to fix those yet. Let's get the memory issue fixed. And if any of these are still coming up, then we'll look at those.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Cool. And if anybody runs into issues using that repo locally, please let us know right away. I checked it on my machine and it works. But you never know. If there's actually an error in the Cabal files, then we'll want to fix those right away. So keep us posted. Cameron, is your Intel Mac set for screen sharing, and would you be willing to take a look at the Nix setup there?
You know, as we talk, I'm trying to get back in and see where I got stuck. So that'll take me a while. I don't know if it'll happen in this particular session. So, but I'll work it right now and see if I can get back there.
No worries. Cool. If you get to that point and want to, just holler, but no pressure today. And Dan, I like the idea of doing
Awesome.
it.
It's just kind of, you know, my first meeting here. So I just thought I'd listen in and see what you guys are all about. So
Cool. Thanks for hanging.
yeah.
What else do folks want to work on today? So yeah, we got a little bit to update with Demeter. That's an immediate next step.
Yeah. Can you have an example of the connection with the front end using the API on the testing?
Say that one more time. I didn't quite get it.
The question which Akash have posted on the Miro board, the connection of front end with PAB. Can you have an example with it? So how the things actually work from the back end to the front end.
Excellent. Yeah, we could do that. I like it.
So that a lot of things get cleared for me and other people. So
Definitely. Sorry, I couldn't find my Zoom. So you're saying maybe look at some example of what we might want an API endpoint to do. Yeah, let's see. There's two things I want to show you here. Actually, three things. I've been mentioning Go Maestro. Some of you have explored it on your own, and they've presented at Playground a few times. But I think this is a place where maybe just looking at their documentation can help us understand a bit more about what needs to happen off chain. And then we can use that as an example to think more generally about this concept of indexers, which is not directly related to this topic, but is good to have in mind. And after we touch on those two things, I have an example of transaction building that we can look at together. I don't have a full-fledged example of this sort of API endpoint that we're talking about, but I think we can map out for ourselves how we might build one and maybe launch a little project together. Does that sound good if we go through those three steps?
Yep. Before that, can we just have an overview about the endpoints? Means how the endpoints are created.
Yeah, okay. Let's define what you would want an endpoint to do. So what's an example of the kind of endpoint that you want somebody to be able to hit?
It's like making a front end and putting some buttons on it. And suppose if someone presses that button, how the connection actually happens with the backend. If the backend is totally in the Plutus, in the Haskell.
Well, so when somebody presses this button, what is the thing that we're hoping will happen, right? Tell me the user story of why they're pressing the button.
Simply, we can create one simple testing API, which will just give an hello world response from the backend. So we will get an confirmation that front end is connected with backend. That's it.
Okay. So before we even talk about PAB, we just want a little bit of lesson about how to use any API, press a button and get a response.
Yes, this can be a starter point. We can go with it.
Okay. Yeah, we can look at that. Okay, and
James,
actually, oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I just had a quick question. I'm trying to catch up here to the PAB learning program, and I've heard you mention Aiken a few times in passing. Are there any intentions of starting a build with an Aiken setup in the future? And I apologize if this has already been answered.
Oh,
Just
not
trying
at
to-
all. No, without a doubt. So we just published module 301 and module 303, we're targeting to release that in 2 weeks. And that'll be a little bit of a deeper dive into Aiken.
Awesome. Okay, then I will have some catching up to do. Thank you so much.
You bet. You bet. There's a couple of really basic introductions to Aiken. There's early in the course, just doing their hello world, but then ripping even that part out and building always succeeds on your own. And we give you the code for that, right? It's just like in Plutus TX, it's not a very complicated validator. It just says true every time. And then we also touch in module 202, one of the 5 ways to mint a token is to write a minting validator in Aiken. So this just will expose you to a slightly more complicated validator. So with those two things in mind, when you get to this module right here, basically what you're going to do is rewrite 3 validators that you've already seen. There's a minting validator that we show you in module 204. and it's written in Plutus TX. Okay, and so that source code is here, and if you've done this already, you've seen it, but if you haven't yet, in 203, you're going to learn a little bit about minting a token with a Plutus script. Then we go through this faucet project in 204, which has a couple of spending validators in it. And so in module 303, you're going to write both of those validators that you've already seen in Aiken. And we're hoping that this approach allows people to say, okay, well, now that I've written the same thing in these two different ways, I have the ability to assess my preferences and kind of see, like, really compare them at a granular level. So that's where we'll start. And I'm hoping that after that, people have a lot more questions, because by then you'll also have a chance to go deeper into Plutus. There's a lot of learning targets in this upcoming module, but a lot of them are really kind of detailed, fine-grained details. And what we're going to see is once you understand these, how do we translate those skills over to Aiken?
I'm super excited about that.
Rock on. Awesome.
Quick aside there, will we be able to compare the scripts in different languages, compare like speeds?
Yes. Yeah, we'll show you how to see that too.
Awesome sauce.
And even more than speed, at the end of the day, transaction cost. Right?
Yes.
If I try to write the same validator in two different languages, and the result of using one of them is I save, 0.1 ADA, that's a pretty compelling reason to switch. So, okay, what's cool about this right here is actually, you know what? I agree, like setting up a Hello World API, Akash, would be a good place to start, but I'm going to allow people to do that, right? If you're brand new to building an API, there's hundreds of tutorials out there for that. Let's focus on playing with Cardano here, okay, and something specialized. If you want to build an API from scratch, we can create a study group for that. But let's just play around with how this is going to work. And this gives us a good reason to look at another tool that I've mentioned a few times, but we haven't really dived into. We've been using GraphQL for a lot of the queries we're writing in this course. And that's really nice. It gives us access to a lot of nicely formatted data. GraphQL, one of the big advantages of it is you get to state precisely what information you need in the response that you're getting, okay? And there's already examples of that inside the Plutus course. We can always look at more of those together. They're running under the hood. But this is a little bit more of an opinionated tool than GraphQL. It's just like BlockFrost, right? BlockFrost gives us API endpoints that return certain things. Koios is a free service, at least still at this point, that does a lot of the same stuff BlockFrost does. And Maestro is a newer service built by people who have seen how those tools worked, and they decided to build something that moves us even more towards indexers, right? Opinionated data, or it's opinionated in the way it processes the data, I guess is the best way to say it. And there's a few, right? They offer this blockchain indexer, transaction manager, whatever turbo transaction is. You can read up on all of these, but let's just jump into the indexer for just a moment. And this gives you an example of some different endpoints you could hit. Let's look at the UTXOs at an address, for example. Okay. So here's a URL for our query. You do need an API key to use Maestro, but a free account gives you enough access to play around and learn some things. You can see right here, this is on mainnet, but I can change this to pre-prod and I can use that. And if I use this, what should I get? Let's run. UTXOs at address. Yeah, here's an example. So it returns maybe something that looks like this. I can query for an address, and then I can see each of the UTXOs in a list from that address. It's got a hash, right? That's just a string. Here's the index. Maybe it has a reference script on it. This one does not. Maybe it has datum on it. This one has a datum hash. Let me see the type. And then there's some value. There's some Lovelace and some units. And notice this right here. This is exactly the format Mesh uses to represent assets. So if you saw this yesterday at live coding for the first time, or if you're experienced otherwise with Mesh, this looks familiar. So it'll be cool to write a query that hit this endpoint right here and put some data on a page. And I know that that's not exactly what we were talking about, but is it okay? Can we try this? Press a button and get a response from a query like this? Faizan, Akash, would that be all right?
Yep. Yes. We can go through.
This is working same as the Mesh.js providing the ready to use functions, right? So
Ooh,
it's kind of
great
just-
question. Great question. Not exactly. Awesome question. Let's look at that for just a second as well. Didn't want these side by side. Get over there. All right. So it's true, for example, that Mesh has some similar functions. I can get the UTXOs, for example, right? But this get UTXOs function here is actually just getting the UTXOs for the connected wallet. And Mesh is great for this. It allows anybody to connect a wallet like Nami, Eternal, etc., and then see the UTXOs. By the way, that look somewhat similar to what we were just seeing there, right? The difference is Go Maestro is allowing us to then query any address, not just the connected wallet address. With that said, Mesh does provide some utilities. It does give us some providers, Koios, which I just mentioned, or Blockfrost, for example. And yes, this is built in. Okay, so you can, in a Mesh project, configure a Blockfrost provider and essentially run the same query I was just showing you there. Okay, or same thing with Mesh. So yeah, it's possible to get certain information without ever even touching that. Like a third-party service like this, you can just build it in. So far, so good there.
Are you able to pull in NFT project data with Maestro?
Yeah. So what would identify an NFT project?
Like the project ID
Yeah.
or a mint name, or like I wanted to get a very specific query, like which type of what specific mint within the which type of a specific type of mint of the 500 NFTs that were minted, if there were two different types, like that, I wanted to be very specific about it.
Beautiful. Yeah, so like right here, I mean, first of all, here are some policy ID endpoints. Here's all the addresses holding a specific policy ID, right? Here's information about it. What does that include? Yeah, like, so this one right here, if you know a policy ID, this will return a list of assets, each with its metadata. And this metadata right here holds all of the information that any NFT is using, right, to identify itself. And this one
So
here,
we can query any asset using that specific policy ID, right?
correct.
So I just threw a policy ID in the chat just for giggles. I just grabbed one from an NFT project. You could just pull that real time through Mastro.
Let's do it. Let's try that right now. I love it. Yep. Here's what we're gonna do. Yeah, that okay with everybody? Let's try using this endpoint. And we'll see if we can get it to work. Yeah, 42 minutes. I think we can squeeze this in.
I didn't mean to deviate from the plan. I just thought.
No, I love it.
question.
I was choosing address because it was arbitrary, but I think this is more interesting. Okay, I'm gonna run locally our course. I have autocomplete running there. That's fun. Let's try that one more time. And let's go. I'm just gonna make a little space. You know what? No, sorry, I'm rethinking this. Let's not use this repo because I want to be able to push the changes in a way that people can play with. Give me 1 second here. There's a front end. This front end playground. Let's use that. PBL 2023 playground. So people have been, one of the places where you can submit assignments in this course is this PBL 2023 playground repo. And let's just get that running. All right, so here that we got this project here. You can see a bunch of students have already submitted merge requests to this one, and there's a bunch of different stuff you can play with. And this is a work in progress. What we want to do is let's add a page to it today. So this is a React or a Next.js. Well, it's a Next.js project. I should be specific. And that means that here in our pages directory, we've got this index file where different people have been adding new pages. Okay. And let's just add a new one. And let's make a new subfolder. We got this students file where you can look at different student work. I'm actually going to use that template, but I'm going to make a new folder called live coding. How about that? Oh, we already have one, live coding demos. Great. What's in there? That might come in handy. But I'm going to keep it even simpler and just use this template to start. We can rename it. Let's call this get NFT data. Now let's just okay, and then we're going to link to that route over here. So this is a live coding demo, and it's called get NFT data. Text. Okay, so now if I jump back over to the browser, here's our little placeholder. I've got a link on the page. Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay. And when I click into that, I should see there's a little hello world up in the corner. Fine. All right, so we've got a working place to play on this page. And if you're an experienced React developer, you know that best practice is going to be to split things up into some different components. For the sake of just playing around right now, I'm going to do a lot of stuff right here in this file, just to see if I can get this thing working. Okay. There's also some examples that I'm going to want to look at in just a minute. And maybe some of that other stuff will get pulled in. We can get rid of that for now. This is our NFT data example. And let's just give this a little space. Using, oh, I can just use a percentage. It's not behaving like I expected to. Here, I'm just screwing around, just trying to give us a place to work on the page. I'm getting this extra spot at the top, and I don't know why. Okay, that's better. All right, so we can play with that. Good. So we're going to make an example in a box on that page right there. And what we want to do is consume. Oh, that was in my other browser. We want to consume this mainnet endpoint right here with a policy ID on it. And we're going to get a list of information about tokens. And then we'll see what we can do with the information in that list. Now, there's actually an example of how to do something similar in the PBL course itself. So I'm going to keep these pages open. Don't need that one anymore. But I'm just going to call up some of the source code of our course. And we have a page right here. This is the page that shows us the list of everybody who has a contributor token in the course. And there's one example here that uses a GraphQL query that looks like this to get some of the data. And I'm not going to go on too much of a detour to talk about what exactly this is for, but that's something we've done before and we can return to at any time. But the thing is, it's not the only query on this page. Okay, there's another bit down here that shows a course mastery overview. The component looks like this in the source code. And on the page, I'll just show you what this looks like. On the page, that is this part right here. This is the course mastery overview, these 6 squares arranged in a grid. And so I have this component open in my editor over here. And there's some data that we pull in like this. And this data is coming from a Go Maestro API call. In this case, it's looking at the UTXOs at an address, and then it's taking that data and rendering it. So we're actually going to go through exactly this process right here. And so let me, just so if anybody looks at this later, I want you to be able to find this. Oops, that's not it. This one. Components LMS master. Okay. So I'm just taking that link so you have it. If anybody looks at this repo later. And what's nice is now we can kind of use this as a template right here. So the first thing we notice, there's going to be a use effect hook. Use effect hooks in 15 seconds for anybody who's new to React. They allow you to build a page and start to display it before you have all the data you need. And if you've any web user knows this, right? Often you will load a page, you'll see some parts of that page, but you might still see a loading wheel over here on the side where some live data is loading. And one of the ways to accomplish that user experience is with use effect hooks. They allow us to render the page, but then change data within it on the fly as the data changes or is loaded. So we're gonna build a use effect hook, and inside of it, we're gonna follow pretty closely this pattern right here. So let's just set up the plumbing for that. We're gonna build a use state hook that says, we'll call it our NFT data. And this is a use state. We're gonna break some TypeScript rules and allow it to be anything for now. But later on, you always want to change that. We don't want to leave those any's in production, but as we're building quickly and we haven't built types yet, this is an okay approach. I'll import use state from React. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to say, okay, this is the variable that we can put on the page. Let's do it down here. Let's see this. And then let's make another box inside of this. And this is our NFT data. And then we'll just put that data right here. Okay. So now right now, this our NFT data is undefined, so it's not going to show anything. Watch. I'll pull that page up again. Where's my local host? Right. This is our NFT data. Oh, there's nothing. Okay. However, if I do something like this, I could just say set NFT data like this. I have a problem because now this thing is rendering over and over again. I'm not allowed to call that set NFT data function directly like this in my code. And so this is where the use effect comes in, the one that we were seeing right over here. But let's write a very basic use effect to start. All right, this we're just going to say use effect. This is the general format. You can learn this if you've never seen this before. But if I put this set NFT data inside of that, now I no longer have a problem. The error is gone from my front end. And you can see that now I've given that set NFT data a value. Hello there. Cool. So now we just want to use this use effect hook to set the value of our use state hook. And then we'll put that data on the page. Once we get that working, we'll decide how we might want to make that data prettier. Okay, so inside of this use effect over here, we grab a couple of things. One of the things we grab is our API key from a private environment variable that's never published like publicly, okay? And so anytime I want to interact with Go Maestro, I do need an API key. And here you can see I'm pulling it in as a variable. If that variable exists, then keep going and use that variable right here. I'm going to do what I absolutely should never do right now and just put an API key on the screen. I'm going to go over to Go Maestro right now. And let me log in.
I had a quick aside question.
Of course.
Well, as you're logging in, I noticed that you used heading for that when you put that in. How do you deal with like H2, H3 tags as far as semantic SEO?
Got it. Okay, this is a Chakra UI tag. And we used Chakra just to like give people kind of a simple way to start learning how sites are structured if they haven't maybe spent that much time with HTML before. And Chakra actually takes care of all that really nicely under the hood.
Very cool.
I don't really use Chakra UI in development. I would much rather use just the typical HTML tags and say Tailwind, for example. But this is a nice way to kind of just see those pages together. If I started throwing Tailwind tags in here, it just gets really messy real fast.
Got it. Okay, so just like quick scaffolding stuff. Very
Yeah,
cool.
Exactly. And you can look at the docs, right? It does give us all sorts of like helper attributes that we can use. All right, over here, I'm logged into Maestro. I have a pre-prod key that I've been using in the course, and my project limit is reached. Oh, I'm going to break this. Here's what I'm going to do. Let me log out. I'm going to log in with GitHub instead. Hold on one sec. I can't just delete my pre-prod account on Go Maestro because that would break our Plutus PBL site. So I need to just log in by a different method. If anybody from Maestro is watching this, I'm sorry. We're logged in. I can safely delete this account. I'm not using that one anymore. If that breaks something, we'll find it. And then we'll just call this live coding, and we're going to use mainnet for today. And could not create a new project. Not sure why I'm blocked. From creating a project. Well, that's not going to work. Might have to put this one on hold for now, just because I don't know why I can't set up a mainnet project. I don't think it's worth our time to watch me troubleshoot that. So let's do something different. Instead, we can all right, I was looking forward to looking at this. Maybe it just needs a few more minutes. No, okay, I'm gonna stop. Okay, I can't finish that demo right now because I do not have mainnet access to Maestro at the moment.
Yeah, I just tried to do the same. It's not working for me either.
Okay, maybe it's just down on their end. All right, so instead, let's just walk through what's going on here to at least get the idea, because I didn't want to get too stalled on this anyway. This is a great thing for people to explore. There are many tools out there that you can use to pull on-chain datum. And, you know, block frost is probably the most tried and true method. So anybody can play with that one. Free services like Koios or like Dandelion that we offer as a community service can get you a lot of the way. But I'm really interested in these newer services that are a bit more opinionated. And that's why there was just one thing I was really looking forward to playing with. But notice down here in the mesh documentation and this example, here's something kind of cool that they're doing. They're putting SIP25 metadata and SIP68 metadata as part of this schema right here. And that's not built into how the chain works, okay? This is a little extra service that's being provided by this Maestro indexer. You could create a similar service on your own from a simple GraphQL query and get all this same information. And that, for anybody who is interested in building their own microservices, this could be a really fun project. Try to use a plain GraphQL query and parse all the data into a structure just like this one right here. Okay, that's a really nice way to learn a couple of things. But in any case, we have options and we have more options over time for how to get the data we need. And that's what you see right here. I'm back in the code for the PBL course itself. And this is an example of how on the very same page, we can have some data, like these 3 boxes right here, and all of this stuff right here, from one data source, in this case, Go Maestro. And then we can have other data on the very same page. And this is actually the same data as we're seeing here. But this is actually coming from GraphQL under the hood, right? And it's just a way of showing you whatever information you're trying to get, there's multiple ways to get it. But this is just passive information, right? Querying an address, this one right here for the UTXOs at that address. This is fetch. So if you're learning how to consume APIs for the first time, and you just want to be able to grab anything, look up some documentation about the fetch API. Okay, and this is how it works. We pass it a query. We say, hey, hit this address with this request. It's a post request. Body just means that we are sending some parameters along to that request. In this case, a list of addresses that we want to query. And any API service is going to require certain headers. For example, the API key. Now, this one is paginated. That's a bigger topic than we have time to cover today, but you're familiar with this as a user of the web, right? Sometimes if you're scrolling through data on a page and there's a big set of data, it won't all be loaded at once. And so this says, hey, grab us the first 100 and then grab the next 100 and put it all together. In this case, we're not giving you that infinite scroll functionality. We're just loading everything. And once we have some data, process it in a couple of ways, and then use it to put some information on the page. For example, the number of, where is that one? What's on this? Yeah, there's a little bit more processing that happens. Anyway, I'm going down a little bit of a detour here, but let me just leave this up for just a minute. At a high level, does anybody have questions about the syntax here and what it looks like to grab data from anywhere? Akash, what do you mean? So which PAB do you want to start from? Because you're right, Maestro is giving us a ready to go API. Yeah, so Atlas is another tool that's made things easier. You can look into the documentation there. But I'm not so much interested in what tool we use, right? Before we pick which PAB we want to use, let's talk about what do we want it to do? Right? Why are we using a PAB in the first place? Right, so let's go back to these notes from over here, right? If you were going to build a PAB style endpoint, oh yeah, create our own server, we absolutely can. Yes, right. You can index the on-chain data. You can pre-process it any amount you want to, and then you can create your own API server. Definitely. But you still have to initially pull the data from somewhere. Okay, so there's a whole suite of tools that are like deeper under the hood. Cardano DB Sync and Cardano GraphQL, for example, give you the data from which you could then process that data and serve it yourself. Okay. But remember from earlier, a PAB is not just about looking at data. And that's all we've done so far, right? If I'm talking about GraphQL, if I'm talking about Maestro, all I'm doing is looking at data that's already on chain. What I really want to do, if I'm talking about a Plutus application backend, is I want to build transactions. That's how I interact with the blockchain. So what's an example of a transaction that you might want to deliver via your own PAB endpoint? Does anybody here have any transaction that you feel like you've done so many times that you wouldn't mind automating it? Or can you imagine an application where a certain kind of transaction would have to run over and over again?
Can we create one endpoint same as that of Maestro is giving, like we are passing the policy ID to that endpoint, and rest of the thing will be performed by the PAB itself, and it will give the response in the form. We can fetch using the GraphQL also, of course.
So you want, for example, an endpoint that gives you information about a certain policy ID.
Yep. Or the transaction or the UTXOs that has been already in your wallet or on your that address. I have to create one endpoint. I will give the request using the any fetch function, and it will give me the response in the form of that all the transaction that has all the policy IDs or the policy ID that we defined.
Definitely. Definitely. Let's look at that from a GraphQL perspective first, actually. Let's go. Get rid of that one. So a lot of this, I really do recommend just trying to make it work with GraphQL first. Because this will give you that full feel for how to get this information. And then from there, you can think about how you might want to build your own indexer to make this easier to grab. Okay, so should we look at policy ID first? Get all of the assets with a certain policy ID?
Yes.
Let's look at that. This one is all the transactions with an asset ID. Nah, we don't want that. Oh yeah, sure. Let's try transactions, but this is on pre-prod. Do we want to look at a mainnet token? I'm going to try Ruben's example here. Let me switch over to mainnet. Um, and actually, that one is pretty good. No, let's not do it like that. Let's. I haven't actually tried this one before. I'm curious. Let's see if that works first. I'm just giving us a little boilerplate here, and then if this works, then we can extend it a little bit. Let's try for this policy ID. So we're saying policy ID needs to be this. Does that work? One. Oh, hash 28x. Let's try again. I'm not exactly sure. I got to do a little research. Yeah, Chris, I got you. I'm not exactly sure why I need to fix this query. I was trying to do it on the spot and I'm not familiar enough. Anybody see what's going wrong with my query right here? And in the chat, here's mainnet and pre-prod. So you can play with it. But here instead, I'm trying to here this example right here gives us recent transactions for a given token. And let me show you this one. At least see if we can get this to go. Still happening. Might be because we're asking for a policy ID. Yeah, I mean, so this is what the results should be like. I'm not sure why I'm getting this error right here. And I know we're at time right now. But just to think about it, right? You can write a query. This one happens to say, give me all of the transactions that include a specific token, not the whole policy ID, but just a single token. Okay, asset ID. And it gives us all this information back, but it doesn't have to, right? So I can see I'm getting a list of transactions. How many items are in this list? There's 5, right? So for this token, doesn't matter what it is. With this happens to be a PPBL contributor token, but this gives me a list of every time this token has ever been used in a transaction. And with this information, maybe this is more than I need, right? Maybe I don't want all of the inputs and outputs, for example. So I can just delete that from my query and I can run the query again. And now look, the query result is shorter, which of course is going to result in a faster application. So GraphQL allows me to very quickly highlight exactly the information I want to get. Looks like I don't need metadata because none of these have it, right? I can get rid of that. Maybe I could do something like that, right? Or of course, maybe I want those inputs and outputs back. Let's say I don't want the metadata and the inputs, but I do want the outputs, but I don't really care about all the details of those outputs. I don't need the address. I don't need the datum, for example. I could look at that, right? So we can customize this query already however I want to. And by writing focused queries, you can do a lot of what you need to do. That said, you might still want to pre-process this data, like Akash is suggesting, and create your own server that has specifically formatted data. Went back, I'm reading Cameron in the chat, moved ahead. Oh yeah, the dev environment. Yep, exactly. If you put those questions in Q&A onboarding, that's the best place to go. And these are 2 things. It sounds like maybe Dan, you can help us organize a help session on getting Nix up and running. It does take a little bit of time, but there's a couple of known problems that a lot of us have seen, and we can help you get there. And I do think it's worth it. So yeah, keep those questions coming in the chat, and we'll talk about that next week.
Yeah, definitely put them in Q&A onboarding, and then we can get together and have a chat and a meeting and maybe do a bit of troubleshooting.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, perfect.
And I'm sorry, we didn't finish our goal of hacking together a quick API solution, but there are several examples of this in the course, both in the lessons that you're working through and also in the source code. And then for anybody who's made it through, like Faizan and Akash, like if you guys see something that we haven't done yet and you want to do it, let's talk about that in Discord or in an upcoming live coding, because we definitely want to build some more examples that really give people what they want to learn.
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. And yeah, I definitely recommend see what you can get GraphQL to do, look at the source code, and just always bring those questions to Discord. All right, y'all. Until next time, thanks for exploring a little bit today. I'm excited to see where we go next. Have a good one.
Bye.